Did you all hear who I was? Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the core capability for the autistic framework for supporting autistic people. So really the headline for the framework is that it's going to reflect the mandatory training that all health and social care staff are going to need. So it's not just for learning disability providers, it's going to be for everybody in health and social care. Should I just move that down? There we go. So were people aware of this framework at all? It's only been out a couple of weeks. Yeah, are you a learning disability provider?
I'm a practice development partner for a company who support a wide range of people.
Okay.
So I have to stay up to date.
Okay, well done. That is very up to date. Excellent. Okay. So I've put the links in the presentation so you can click on it and find it really. So this link will take you to the framework. Okay. Just a bit of background really is there are 5 key drivers that kind of have driven this. The first one is the consultation response. So there was a consultation earlier in the year that went out from the Department of Health and Social Care to look at whether mandatory training should be mandatory for learning disability and autism. The response to the consultation was and that it should reflect the core capability framework. So the framework is out, and I know lots of our providers are looking to see whether the framework matches the training that they'll be delivering, so that will be reflected in that. The other driver is the LEDA, or the Learning Disability Mortality Review. Have people heard of this? Okay. If you haven't, I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then there are 2 campaigns, one from MENCAP and one Oliver's campaign. And then finally the NHS long-term plan. This is the response to the consultation. It's called Right to be Heard. So it gives you details of all the respondents and who responded in relation to the consultation. Have you had a chance to look at that yet?
Not fully. I'm good by hand. It's a big document.
Okay. So the consultation, so the majority of respondents felt that it should be mandatory and the training should reflect this framework, basically. So this is a completely new framework. It's completely new for the government to kind of prescribe any mandatory training for health and social care. So it's quite brand new, really. The other framework which links to this is supporting people with learning disabilities. So that has been out since 2016, but that's been updated and refreshed as well. So that's new to look at if you haven't seen it already. So I'm just going to concentrate on the mandatory aspect because it's going to affect all of you rather than just learning disability providers for today. So I've included the link if you weren't aware about LEDA. So this is the Learning Disability Mortality Review Programme. Oh, I was worried about saying that, it's a bit of a mouthful. So this programme has been going since 2005-2006, and it reviews the deaths of people with a learning disability. So it produced a report earlier this year in May. It announced or published that since it's been going, there's been 12 people with learning disability that have died through constipation. Just leave that there a minute. It's just, I still can't get over. So that's what was actually recorded on the death certificate, that 12 people died of constipation. So that's one of the reasons for the report and why it's kind of such a driver for the government. So it's mentioned in the long-term plan. One other statistic is that if you're a male with learning disabilities, you're likely to die 27 years younger, 25 years younger than if you didn't have a learning disability. So I just think that's quite shocking. For women, you're likely to die 27 years earlier if you have a learning disability. So those are just 2 statistics behind the LEDA report and why it's kind of such a key driver. This MENCAP campaign was a survey and a campaign. It's called Treat Me Well. Again, I've included well, the link is on there somewhere. So this carried out some research and kind of all the respondents felt that there should be more training on learning disability, and they felt that it would support avoidable death for people with a learning disability. So this Treat Me Well campaign is on the MenCap website. It's also, the reason why I mentioned it, it's also the response document to the campaign and to the consultation. The other campaign that was mentioned is Oliver's campaign. Have people come across Oliver's campaign? Yeah, okay, so this is a really interesting story. So Oliver had learning disabilities. He died an avoidable death. So he has learning disabilities. He died in 2016. He was in hospital and he was prescribed antipsychotic medication against the will of him and his parents. His medical records stated that he had an intolerance to antipsychotic medication. Shortly after he was given the dose, he had severe brain swelling and he died. So that was a completely avoidable death. The link as well I've included in the slides, so please have a look at the whole story. There's more to it than that. But this is heavily mentioned in all of the government response and the campaign, so it's really interesting. It's also cited that the training, the mandatory training around autism, is going to be named after Oliver. So that's to kind of remind people of why the training is important and to kind of give that personal aspect to it as well. I didn't read my notes so much. And the fifth driver is the long-term plan. So the response to this really kind of reflects the outcomes of the LEDA report to look at health inequalities with people with learning disabilities to make sure that it's equal, they have equal access and people don't die an avoidable death. So that's, it's mentioned as you would expect in all of the consultation. So the framework itself was developed by Health Education England. The project delivery was by Skills for Health in conjunction with Skills for Care, the National Autistic Society and Opening Doors, and also driven by a board of people who have autism and family who have autism family members as well. So that's just a bit about the framework. It sits alongside the Learning Disability Framework, which I mentioned earlier, which has been refreshed. It sits alongside the Advanced Clinical Practice, which is due to be published at the beginning of the year, and obviously person-centred supports as well.
Autism being hereditary?
Sorry?
Autism being hereditary?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Basically. Does anybody know? Anybody else? So the framework is split into 5 different domains or areas or subheadings, whatever you would like to call them. And they're broken down into different tiers. So for the mandatory training, we're concentrating on tier 1. So that's the requirement. So there's also a requirement for frontline care staff to be trained, and that's at tier 2. Tier 3, from here, also it says in the report, in the consultation, that registered managers should be trained at tier 3. So depending on the level of interaction that you have with people with autism will be dependent on the depth and breadth of knowledge and training that you would need to have. So tier 1, domain 1, it's broken down into different capabilities, but it's quite structured on what the requirements are for people for the mandatory training. Does that make sense? So as I said, it's domain 1, capability 1. Within that there are 15 learning outcomes, and I've said that the training should consist of things about not making assumptions, understanding the numbers of autistic people, looking at the characteristics and the impact that you have, and the legal context about making reasonable adjustments. So that's without kind of going through all 15. That's just a synopsis of what the capabilities include. So it's going to hopefully kind of the guidance is that it's going to be woven into different training as well. So the good opportunity would be at the induction or through the care certificate. it needs to include kind of not just e-learning but a face-to-face element. It's about real-life case studies as well, so it's going to, I imagine, have heavily weigh on Oliver McGowan's kind of story as well. This is the timelines, the timescale that they have for all of this. So in March next year, we're going to develop a standardised training package. So Skills for Care are going to be involved in developing a package with providers and co-produce with autistic people as well to look at what that package will look like, and it'll be involved in piloting. Then following that, they'll publish the development tools and guidance about what tier people should be on. And then they're looking to speak to CQC about how to make sure that this is carried out through their inspections, and then kind of a wider rollout, publish the training documents, and then look to amend the Care Act to include it in the Care Act as well. So it's something kind of today to be aware of, to have a look at what's involved, to see whether you already meet the standards or there are some bits that you might need to add. On our website, and I've included the link on there, there's some training resources around autism awareness, so just to kind of start you thinking around what that might look like, what support is already available. So this is just to note that the Norfolk County Council have got training around autism. They've got a face-to-face course and e-learning, so it's kind of at this very minute, I think, kind of being matched to see if it maps the new core capabilities as well. So it can be gifted to partners, it's on your website. Has anybody accessed that training already? Okay. And that was just so I didn't forget to tell you that the learning disabilities framework has also been updated. So that's been updated to include the information from the LEDA report about health inequalities. So that reflects. So it seems like it's all kind of matching up and looks kind of from a bigger picture. It's really nice to see that it's kind of all connected or synthesised. Someone used that word the other day. So yeah, I quite like that word. I managed to slip that in. That's good. I've just got a short video, it's just a couple of minutes, so I think we've got time. It's to look at about reasonable adjustments for people with autism. So it's just to hear from people with autism, people who work with autism, to kind of see what reasonable adjustments that they have.
The people who helped with this work said that these are the important things you need to
make it very clear to the person why they are being assessed. Be explicit.
Before you start, let them know that it's okay if they need to take a break, but also find out how they will let you know.
Make reasonable adjustments. Somebody might be too scared to come to an appointment.
Understand processing time, make appointments a little bit longer, and make sure you take time to check back to make sure they've understood and that they were definitely listening.
Be aware that a parent attending an appointment with their child may also have autism.
When you meet me, don't ask me how I am. My brain just stops functioning. I lose my train of thought completely. I can't answer it without having to do a status check.
Medical professionals should ask at the beginning, how does your autism affect you? They should then follow this with closed questions.
When I tell you about my disabilities, it can be disheartening. Try to focus on my strengths and don't emphasise too heavily on my weaknesses.
You don't know what you don't know, and don't be afraid to ask.
Check what my behaviour means. The same behaviour can be a good mood or a bad one.
Provide accessible written information to look at after appointments.
You will learn more about me if you talk with me about things that I am interested in, even if they seem boring or silly to you.
Being judged or assessed is very stressful for me. You'll probably be better off asking me about things when I'm sitting in a dark cupboard or driving my car, because I'm not so stressed then.
I spend a lot of time being treated like a token LD person. Don't make this experience more of that.
If I've got enough notice, change won't bother me.
If you're going to be late, please let me know, even if you broke your leg.
Easy read doesn't always mean accessible.
My behaviour is not how autistic I am.
Don't tell me an injection won't hurt, or you'll chop my leg off, or that I'll be playing an England football team anytime soon, unless you actually mean it.
Don't make assumptions about me from the way that I look or behave.
All behaviour is communicating something.
Don't assume the person will vote on the information you need.
I can hide my autism, but I can't switch it off.
Ask me about my triggers and respect them.
I have an aversion to crisps that some people might find unusual. Don't expect me to sit down and get too comfortable if there's crisps nearby.
If someone needs to touch me, then be aware I might have sensory issues and need more processing time.
Structure an appointment. Maybe write it down, draw a diagram or a graph, so that the person attending knows what to expect.
Making reasonable adjustments is not cuddling.
Ask the person, does anyone else have worries that you may or may not understand?
I can hear what you're saying better if I'm doing something with my hands, like knitting or spinning. It's a more socially acceptable way of stimming than flapping my hands.
Medication may affect us differently.
Equality is valuing everyone, but treating them as an individual.
Being able to describe how to do something doesn't mean that I can actually do it.
You may not be able to tell when I'm in pain or distress.
Be honest about timeframes. If you don't know, say it.
I make unreasonable adjustments for neurologically typical people all of the time, and it exhausts me.
The answer to, can you cook a meal, could be yes, but do you need to know whether they can go shopping, plan the meal, create different meals? Separate questions should be asked.
Don't promise something that you can't deliver, but don't be too scared to talk about something that might be possible.
When you're finishing an assessment, let the person know that it's okay for them to email, text or write down any information that they may have forgotten or didn't feel comfortable saying face to face.
Be real ally and stand up for what this person needs.
I'm an individual with autism.
I'm an individual with autism.
I am an individual with autism.
How does autism affect you?